welcome to day 2. So today we are going to be talking about the deep core activation. So yesterday we touched on breathing techniques. So we're going to tie yesterday's in with what we're doing today, so it all ties together. So with the deep core, when we think about the core, we traditionally think about the rectus abdominis. So that's your six-pack muscles, the ones that come straight down, and your obliques. So you have your outer muscles. So they are the primary movers for like crunches. So that's flexion of the hip. But what we want to target is the deep muscles. So the stabilizing muscles, the ones that are responsible for stabilizing the hips, but also with activating the deep core or having the deep core functioning properly. They help with all the other movements, like every movements that happens through the core. And so when we think about the core, it's not just right here. It's not just, that's not your core. Those are abs. So the obliques, rectus of abdominis. So that's what you traditionally think about. But where we are going, we're going right inside the pelvic floor and thinking about the diaphragm, so your breathing system. So what we're going to be doing is when we tie them both together and we're able to sync your breathing with activating the core when we do workouts, and you're going to perform more optimally, you're going to have more engagement. So the two muscle groups that we're going to be talking about is your pelvic floor and your transverse abdominis. So your TVA. We call this one the corset muscle. So it wraps from behind the spine, comes up to the rib and down to the hip. So these muscles, traditionally, if you start tightening them, you'll notice your waist will pull in more. So just a small, it's when we think about when we're activating, we're not wanting it to like fire super hard, because when we, when we tighten harder, we're actually starting to engage other muscles that we don't want to. So all the activating series, it's not a very hard contraction. It's a soft, I feel that movement. So the first thing that we're going to do is start off with a breath that we learned yesterday. So we're going to do 10 breaths, just 10 normal breaths, and we're going to do this on the ground. I'm only going to demonstrate 5, but you do 10, okay? So on the ground, can you see me? Yep, okay. So knees bent, hips level. So let's see, okay. So hips level, so you don't want it super arch or you don't want it too far on the ground. You kind of want it right in the middle, right? So this is what we are when we have optimal. Just positioning is really crucial to activating the muscles correctly. So with the breathing, remember, shoulders down, neck tucked in. Ribs are not flared up. That means your arch is backed up as well. So bring your ribs down. And we're going to take that breath, so you can landmark with your thumbs if you'd like to get that feedback. So breath in. So now we're going to add our core engagement. So first, what I want you to do is I really want you to find that center of where your hips should rest. I just broke it down to the breathing just so it's not too complicated. So now adding on to the breathing, we're going to tie in the core activation. So what I want you to do is I want you to rotate the hips, so tilting the hips forward, so creating that arch, and then pushing down all the way into the ground. So arching all the way up to the furthest point that way, and then down into the ground the furthest way down. So you're going to do 10. And think about that breath, so we're not just letting this just go to just resting. So you're going to inhale up, exhale down. Inhale up, exhale down. Ah, cramp. Okay, so inhale up, exhale down. And now we're going to find the center. So don't go as far up this time, and then don't go as far down this time. It's kind of like I think they're called a pendulum. So I kind of do. Okay, there's my center. So your hips would be neutral. If you find the bony bits on your hip, just landmark that, and it shouldn't be too tilted up or it shouldn't be rotated down. It should be sitting kind of flat, like neutral. Okay, so now that you have found your neutral spine, so this is going to create optimal alignment. So with the bony bits on your hip, I want you to just bring it in towards the midline just a little bit, so it's just off that bone, and just feel there. If it probably feels a little bit mushy, you're like, I don't know what I'm feeling. It's because you should be at rest and there shouldn't be anything firing right now. So pushing into that muscle, and now let's tie the breath in and see if you feel anything happening under your fingers. So take that breath in, feel the rib cage. You may feel a little bit of abdominal pressure against your fingers. And you may not have felt anything on that one. That's okay. That just means the work that we're going to do is going to be beneficial. So, breath in. If you're still not feeling anything, that is really okay. Now we're going to add something in, okay? So when you take a breath in, allowing everything to relax, we're not protruding our stomach upwards. So that breath isn't, we're not doming, creating a dome with our belly when we breathe. So that breath should be coming into the ribs, filling into the ribs, sideways, and then as you take a deeper breath, you will notice your belly rise a little bit, but it's not going to protrude up. It's not sticking up. You're not filling the belly with air. You will have the belly lift slightly just because of the abdominal pressure pushing up, and that's okay and that's normal. Just not where it's like doming up and you're pushing through that breath through the belly. It's in the ribs. The breath is in the ribs. So remember, when you're taking that breath, you want the ribs to flare out and it'll slightly rise up here. Okay, and that's okay. So when we take that breath in, everything should feel a little bit more relaxed. You should feel some pressure just from everything rising and pushing, and that's okay. But with your transverse abdominis, and that's what we're feeling through the hip here, with that should be activated through the exhale on the breath out. So how we're going to activate that is by activating our pelvic floor. So by activating our pelvic floor, it's going to help support the diaphragm, because when you take the breath in, your diaphragm pushes down, and so does your pelvic floor. It shifts down to create the space for your organs, essentially. So it pushes down. So if you think about it, here's your diaphragm, okay? Let's go here. Diaphragm, pelvic floor. It's like a cup, and this is like a dome. So, well, kind of more flat when it starts out. So when you take a breath in, okay, so that pressure, okay, that pressure is going to happen, creating movement in the belly. Again, that is okay. We just don't want you to push the belly out. That's creating more pressure and activating other muscles that we don't want activated right now. So to activate that pelvic floor, what I want you to do when you exhale is, I want you to feel like you're needing to go to the bathroom, but you can't yet. So you have to hold it. So not tightening so hard that you're clenched up. It's just an activation. So that means it's just pulling in a little bit. It's like Kegels. It is like Kegels, except that we're incorporating into the breath, and we're not clenching. It's just a slight like, oop, don't let it go out. Okay, so I know it's a lot. There's a lot to think about, but the more you do it, the more repetitions you do, the easier it gets, and it becomes a habit. It becomes how you breathe. So you could re-watch this video over and over again, get the cues, because it does get complicated. But I'm hoping that by breaking it down by days, that we're able to understand what's happening by the time we're moving on to the next step. So today we're incorporating the breath with the activation of the deep core. So that's including the pelvic floor. So right now, just squeeze, holding in your pee, like you're gonna go pee. So you're gonna pull it in, hold, not super tight. You're not clenching your butt either. It's just holding in that pelvic floor, and relax. Holding in that pelvic floor and relax. So adding Kegels is really good. So if you're struggling with jumping jacks, sneezing, and coughing even, this will help strengthen your pelvic floor so that doesn't happen. You can feel confident doing jumping jacks, and maybe even like box jumps too. So strengthening your pelvic floor is super, super, super important, especially if you've had kids. You'll understand why if you don't. So taking that breath in, and as we exhale, I want you to think about that pelvic floor and just tightening it a little bit. Inhale. As you inhale, I want you to relax, turn everything off. And then as you exhale, pull that pelvic floor up. Now on your landmark, find the bony bits, go in a little bit. So inhale in. Exhale, pull up that pelvic floor. Notice a difference. Oh yeah. So you should feel as you exhale the tightening. You should feel tightening of your transverse abdominis. So right in here, just deeper. So it should turn off during the inhale. You'll feel pressure, but not the same pressure that you feel when you do the exhale with the pelvic floor. So inhale. Exhale, pull in that pelvic floor. There we go. So you want to do 10 to 15 of these ones on your own. So this breath is really going to encourage the activation of your TVA through workouts. So the more we can activate it through that breath, your body's going to understand, okay, this is how I need to breathe. I need to activate my TVA through that breath. So inhale, exhale, pull in that pelvic floor.